The next section in this is ghadab, which means anger. And he begins it by saying, وَبَحْرُهَا الزَّاخِرُ أَعْنِيَ الْغَضَبَ إِن تَأْتِي شَطَّهُ تَرَى الْعَجَائِبَ أَمْوَاجُهُ طَامِيَةٌ كَذَا اللُّجَجِ أَلَا فَعَنْهُ حَدِّثًا وَلَا حَرَجٍ. As for the swelling ocean of all of these diseases, so what he means here is that the ocean of all of the diseases of the heart is anger. And if you come to its shore, you'll see what astonishes. تَرَى الْعَجَائِبَ. If you come to the shore of the ocean, just the shore, you haven't even gone in it and looked at what's in it, you'll see ajaib. Its waves and everything else about it are overflowing. So say of it what you will without constraint. In other words, say whatever you want about ghadab and don't feel any constraint, because it's an amazing thing. And there's a hadith that has some weakness, but it's an important hadith in its meaning. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ, he came to his front and he said, Ya Rasulullah, he said, tell me, what's the best thing to draw near to Allah? And he said, husn al-khuluq, good character. And then he went to his right side and he said the same, and the Prophet said, husn al-khuluq. And then he went to his left side and he said the same, he said, husn al-khuluq. And then he went behind him and he asked the same, and the Prophet said, awalam tafqah? Haven't you understood? La taghdab. Don't get angry. And there's another hadith where a man was asked the Prophet ﷺ, what is the worst thing that one incurs concerning Allah? And he said, غضبه, his anger. And he said, كيف نتجنبه يا رسول الله? How do we avoid it? لا تغضب. Don't get angry yourself. If you don't want Allah to get angry at you, don't get angry yourself. كيف ما تدين تدان. How you behave is what will be shown to you. And then the famous hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Rasulullah, awsini, give me some advice. He said, La taghdab. فَكَرَّ عَلَيْهِ awsini. And then he said again, La awsini, tell me, give me advice. In other words, that wasn't enough for him. So he said, give me some advice. He said, La taghdab, don't get angry. He said, Ya Rasulullah, awsini, I want some more. He said 3 times, La taghdab, don't get angry. So ghadab and the controlling ghadab is the key to good character. And the Prophet ﷺ, in that hadith when he said La taghdab, the ulama radiallahu anhum, our scholars, that it does not mean don't get angry. In other words, don't feel anger. Because even the Messenger of Allah said, إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ أَغْضَبْ مِثْلُكُمْ. I am a man, a human being, and I get angry like you do. And his anger could be seen in his face. If he got angry, he had a vein in his forehead. If he got angry, it manifested. So the Prophet ﷺ was not saying, don't get angry, don't have the feeling of anger, because anger is not a negative thing in and of itself. It's actually essential to the human character. And many things would never get done if people didn't get angry. But anger, if it's not transmutated into something that's useful for the human being, it will destroy him. And that's the point. So when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, La taghdab, what he meant ﷺ, according to our scholars, Imam Nawawi and others, don't allow your anger to take control of you. Be in control of your anger. And some of the ulama have said that anger is like the hunting dog. If you don't train it, it won't get what you need. So it's literally needs to be trained. Because If you don't get angry, many of the injustice of the world would never be opposed. If people not get angry, people could go around with impunity and do things, and nobody would get upset. That's not what Allah wants from us. He wants you to get, but He doesn't want you to get angry for your sake. He wants to get angry for Allah's sake. This is the transformation of ghadab. Just like these other diseases, you transform them so that they're no longer working against you, but working for you. And the reason that He calls this the ocean is because this will destroy many people. They'll drown in it. They'll drown in the ocean of wrath and anger. And it will take them to destruction and despair. Now, he's going to go into some dawah, but at this point I wanted to make a diversion that's not really a diversion because it's very much related to this. Imam al-Ghazali radiallahu anhu identified 4 essential qualities, and this is in earlier traditions as well. You'll find this in other traditions. This is not unique to Islam. But the Muslims recognize the truth of it, and this is why our Imams adopted that model. Fakhruddin al-Razi adopts it, and others. Imam Raghib Isfahani adopts it in his book on Akhlaq, and Imam al-Ghazali adopts it also. And it is a model that looks at the human soul and recognizes certain qualities. And Imam al-Ghazali says there are 4 qualities in the human soul. The 4 qualities that he identifies, the first one is called quwwat al-ilm. And in the Western tradition they call it the rational soul. Quwwat al-ilm. And that is that within the human being there's a power that by its nature is related to what man knows. And then the next one is called quwwat al-ghadab, which is the irascible soul, which is in the human being, it's the element that relates to his emotions, the basis of which is anger. And it's interesting that Imam Jalaluddin al-Rumi, rahimahullah, he once said that the wisdom for the prohibition of khamar is that most people are angry. And if they drink, the root of their soul is exposed. Because a lot of people get angry when they drink. They become belligerent. And so he said it's like a veiling from Allah. You know, not to expose people's inherent anger. So that most people at the core root of their soul is this quwwat al-ghadab, anger. And then quwwat al-shahwa, and I think I spelled it wrong, but it's concupiscent soul, the soul that's related to appetite, the appetitive. I'll use that word, because I can spell that. Yeah, that's a college word. The appetitive soul is the soul related to shahwa. Right? It's your shahwani nature. You have appetite. And then the 4th power is quwwat al-adl, which according to Imam al-Ghazali is the quwwa that harmonizes these 3. So that the human being is functioning healthy. None of these are out of balance. Now, these relate to what are known you find this in Western tradition and you find it in the Muslim tradition. The Muslims called them ummahat al-fada'il. In the Western tradition they call them the 4 cardinal virtues. And the ummahat al-fada'il are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. In the Islamic tradition, they call this hikmah, shaja'a, iffa, and adl. Now, when the rational soul is balanced, the result is hikmah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يُؤْتَى حِكْمَةً فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever is given hikmah is given much good. And hikmah, according to Imam al-Ghazali, is the mean between balada and khid'ah. If the wisdom of the human being, in other words, their intellectual, this quwwat al-ilm, the rational soul, if it's in want, the result is stupidity. People do stupid things. And if it becomes excessive, the result is trickery. They become clever and use their intellect for manipulation, for tricking, exploiting people. Right? And which is an essential quality in order to get a job as a CEO, usually. Right? CEOs tend to be people that have this excess of this quwwat al-ilm, but they use it for manipulation. Right? Now, shaja' is when your irascible soul, your ghadab, is under control. And it is a mean between two things. It's a mean between tahawwur, or impetuousness, irrational behavior where people completely lose control, they become angry, they don't have any control over themselves, and then they do things that they regret afterwards. That's one level. Or jabana, cowardice. They don't have enough ghadab, they're too afraid to act. And these are both extremes. One is deficient, naqs, and the other is ziyada. And i'tidal is from the hadith, خَيْرُ الْأُمُورِ أَوْسَطُهَا كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكَ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We made you a middle people, a people of wisdom, hikmah, a people of shaja'ah. Right? These virtues, if they're balanced, they become the qualities of the human being. And then iffa is the middle way of quwwat al-shahwa. And it's a mean between jumud, which is where there's no energy, indifferent. They don't have shahwa, right? They really don't have an appetite. They're not interested in the opposite sex. They're indifferent to their shahwat. That's called jumud, which is unhealthy in Sharia. The Prophet ﷺ didn't like it. And the excess of it is fisq, where somebody goes into completely indulging in their appetites, and they become somebody who's a slave to their appetitive soul, and they lose that balance between those. So again, quwwat al-shahwa, the balance is iffa. You become afif, and iffa is part of the sharia. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the ignorant people, when they see the poor Muslims, يَحْسِبُهُمْ أَغْنِيَّا مِنَ التَّعَفُّفِ. They think that they're rich because they have this iffa. They're not out trying to get money. So they have this iffa, this dignity in their soul that prevents them from going out and doing things to get money through trickery and khuda and things like this, because it's imbalanced. And then the adl is, it's not a mean. It has an opposite. And the opposite is what? Dhulm. So adl, justice, is not in between anything. It's the opposite of dhulm. Now what you can see then is when these are in balance, you're just. And when they're out of balance, you're zalim. You're oppressing yourself and things like this, because it's imbalanced. And then the adl is, it's not a mean. It has an opposite. And the opposite is what? Dhulm. So adl, justice, is not in between anything. It's the opposite of dhulm. Now what you can see then is when these are in balance, you're just. And when they're out of balance, you're zalim. You're oppressing yourself and others. In other words, if you completely indulge your appetitive soul, you've become zalimun li nafsihi. You're oppressing your soul because you're doing things that the soul was not created to do. Kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu. Eat and drink, but not to excess. The middle. Eat to what you need. There's actually, it's a science now. You can determine based on your body size, you can determine exactly, almost to the, to the gram, how many calories you need every day. And if you eat more than that or less than that, you're zalim. Now Allah, out of His mercy to the human being, has created a natural state. You're in a fitra state when you're healthy, so you'll eat to where you feel satiated at a certain point. And it becomes zulm to your soul when you go beyond that. And this is why the Prophet said, خَيْرُ شَرُّ وِعَاءٍ مَلَأَهُ إِبْنُ آدَمْ بَطْنَهُ. The worst vessel that the human being, son of Adam, fills is his stomach. It's a zulm to your stomach, because the stomach has a haqq. And the haqq is that you leave 1/3 for food, 1/3 for water, and 1/3 for air. That's the haqq, and that's the adala. If you go beyond that, then you've gone beyond the adala of eating. The same with your sexual appetite. Human being has a sexual appetite that if it's expressed naturally, then he'll be in a healthy state. If he transgresses it and goes beyond it, and this is part of this whole now Viagra society, right? Because for many people, as you get older, that aspect of the self should be diminishing as you look more towards akhirah and these things, right? And so it's very natural for that area of, but for people who don't have akhirah as a concern, they still want to be engaging in a shahawat that really they should be moving away from and directing themselves towards the akhirah. You see? And so they go out and they do all these things in order to fulfill their shahwa, which is now excessive shahwa. It's a mental shahwa because the physical shahwa is no longer there. The physical shahwa is not there. It's become a psychological shahwa. So these are the balance of a human being. Now, by the blessing of Allah, according to Imam al-Ghazali, the only human being that ever perfected the balance of these four was the Messenger of Allah. He's the only human being that was ever completely balanced in all three, which resulted in him being the most just of men. So his character is completely just. His nature is adala. And this is why the more you emulate him in his behavior, the more you become closer to being this just human being. For this reason, the Messenger of Allah did not fast all the time, because that would have been deficient in the iffah. You're not giving yourself enough. Nor did he go to the other extreme, but he was in the middle. He said, some days I fast and some days I eat. Ashba' wa ajua'. There's a balance between the human being. The Prophet ﷺ did not become angry when it was inappropriate. He became angry when it was appropriate, and this was his shaja'ah. He became angry when the state needed a mawqif. Imam al-Ghazali says that the honorable is to be angry in the right time, in the right place, to the right person, with the right amount. And how do you do that? By looking at the Messenger of Allah and what he did when he became angry. Because he never allowed his anger to get the best of him to where he prayed against people. He never allowed his anger to get the best of him where he struck people. Right? He didn't. He controlled it. And that is shaja'ah. The Prophet ﷺ also, أَنَا أَعْلَمُكُمْ بِاللَّهِ. He had more knowledge than any human being. And it's perfectly balanced knowledge. There's nothing foolish in his behavior. He never displayed anything that would indicate that there was any thing that was imprudent, that was incorrect for somebody to do who had wisdom. Nor did he use his intellectual gifts for anything that was clever or trickery. He didn't use it to gain dunya. He didn't use it to do these things. He used it for the sake of Allah where it was appropriate. Now, one of the things, and this is Imam Suyuti radiallahu anhu said, sometimes in his book he said, لم يسبق إلي في هذا أحد. You know, I didn't see anybody get this before me. I have never seen this in a book, but I was reading Qadi Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and he mentioned about Abu Bakr, he said no one was more courageous than Abu Bakr of the Ummah after the Messenger of Allah. And I started thinking about that quality of Abu Bakr, courageous, which resulted in a talk that I gave called Abu Bakr and Courage. And it was talking about this virtue. But then I realized something about the Khulafa al-Rashidin. Each one of them embodies one of these virtues as his dominant character. Right? So you can see, obviously, hikmah is Sayyidina Ali, because he's Bab al-Ilm. And Shaja'ah is Abu Bakr. And everybody knows Umar the Just. Now the only one I was worried about was Uthman. Does it really work? And I looked up the word Iffa to get the exact definition, and immediately after it in the Qamus of Feroz Abadi he says, Wa'affan is the Afif Mubalagha. And his name is Uthman ibn Affan. And that's what he was known for. And if you think about it, what was he doing on the day he was killed? He was fasting. So his state is complete iffa, control of his nafs. Right? And even the angels were shy before Uthman because he had so much iffa. So each one of them embodies one of these four virtues as a dominant quality, but all of them, Ali was shuja', Ali was adal, Ali was hakim, Ali was afif. But the dominant characteristic is hikmah. That's what he was given. Sayyidina Abu Bakr was alim, he was afif, he was adal. But you can see in his mawaqif, shuja'a. Because the shuja', the courageous one, is the one that does not waver when other hearts waver. That's the definition of courage, is thabat and al-masa'ib. And if you look at all of these events that took place in the history of the seerah, it was Abu Bakr who was thabit. He was the one that never wavered when everybody wavered. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, I presented Islam to everyone, and the only one that didn't waver was Abu Bakr. His heart was shuja'. He was, right? I mean, that's his nature, shuja'. So, now, there's another really interesting thing about this. Ghadab, because it's one of these quwwah, it's coming from something that's essential to the human nature. Right? If you look at the brain, the way the brain has been made, right? They call the human brain a triune brain, because it has three dominant centers. And this is also not so modern. I mean, this is actually, Imam al-Ghazali does mention this. The lowest brain, they call it the R brain, which is really out of evolutionary theory, the reptilian brain. And this is the appetitive center of the brain. It functions, these basic functions, the drive, the urges of the human being, the food urge, the sex urge, all these urges. And then there's the midbrain. So this would relate to the appetitive. And then the midbrain is where the emotions are centered. And from this model, the root emotion is ghadab. And this is why children, the real first emotions that they display are ghadab. They get angry, right? And they express the anger through crying, and as they get older through, tantrum, or they always learn la before they learn na'am, right? They learn no before they learn yes. And you can see it rooted in that. So this brain is related to the emotions, and this is why there's a beautiful hadith in Imam At-Tirmidhi, in which the Prophet said, "Ahbib mahbubak hawnan ma, asa an yakuna baghidak yawman ma, wa abghid baghidak hawnan ma, asa an yakuna mahbubak yawman ma." He said, love the one you love up to a point, because one day he might hate you. And the wisdom here is, if you tell somebody all your secrets, and then one day they turn on you, which is a human experience. It occurs quite often. And people are often devastated by that. And also, don't hate people extremely, because one day that you might end up being people that love each other. So be balanced in your love and in your hate. And so this is again an indication of having a balance of emotions. And when they get out of balance, people become, if you have too much love, one of the Arabs, he said, "La takun sukkaran fatubla." Don't be sukkar and get eaten up. "Wa la takun hamdala faturma." And don't be colocynth and get thrown away. Don't be too sweet, because they'll eat you alive. And don't be too bitter, because you won't have any friends. Right? So be balanced. And that's the idea. And then finally, what they call the new brain is the neocortex, which is where this would be the quwwat al-ilm, the rational. When these three are functioning properly, the human being is adil. Right? In other words, and see, this is part of the human condition. You have people that are excessively cerebral. They're completely in their heads. And everything's theoretical to them. There's nothing practical. They go to this extreme. Then you have other people that are like reptiles out there. They're literally living like reptiles. And I explained this once in a prison, and some of these people, that Muslim inmates, really responded to this. And one came up to me afterwards. He said, "You know that thing about the reptilian brain?" He said, "There's a lot of reptiles here." He said, these guys are like snakes, just waiting to attack you. Right? It's an interesting phenomenon, this idea of people in that really completely reactionary mode. Right? There's no humanity there. And then you have people that are, obviously, you see them overly emotional. Right? They're either angry, right? They become, and that's the more common one, to get people that are very angry. So now, I just brought all of that in there to put this into perspective. Anger is one of the excesses of the human condition, which is why he calls it the ocean, because it really is the big one. And there's basically three reasons why people get angry. One of them relates to primal needs. Food, shelter, life, those type things. That's the first type of. Now this is majbool. Yani the human being, if he doesn't get angry for this, he's considered ahmaq. He goes under the category of stupidity, because this is a survival. If somebody's threatening your life, you have to respond to it, right? You need to respond to it. If somebody is threatening your family, you need to respond to that. That is a ghadab that Allah loves. And Allah loves shuja'a walau fi qatli hayya. even in killing a snake. It's a hadith. And also the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man mata duna malihi mata shahida." Anyone that dies defending his wealth dies a shaheed. So that ghadab, and because part of it is you don't want people to think it's easy in a society to rob people. You don't, your act in doing that is a type, it's an ultimate amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar. And if you die doing it, you died in jihad. Because amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar is jihad. It's in bab al-jihad. It's a type of jihad. So, the second type is also, and this is common to human beings. The second type is also common to human beings. But this relates to position. Right? Jah. Or it relates to things that have to do with ru'yat al-nafs, seeing yourself. Right? In other words, I have dignity. He can't do this to me, right? I'm a human being. And this kind of anger that people get angry about that relates to a sense of belittlement. Somebody is belittling them. Somebody is treating them with disdain. Somebody is treating them less than what they want. And they could be right, they could be wrong. It just depends. Because some people have a completely, they have a complete delusion about who they are. Right? A delusion of the grandeur of their own soul. And so they actually... And then finally the third one relates to specific people. This is a specific one. And this relates to, for instance, an alim, if he sees a book being mistreated, will get angry. But the farmer who's illiterate, he won't get angry. Because he doesn't really understand, what's the big deal? He sat on a book, so what? Whereas the alim sees it, that's wrong because it's related to his. Now, the farmer will get angry if you throw the pitchfork, because it's his tool. What are you doing? You know that you're going to break that, and he'll get upset at that. So this is a type of anger that relates to specific people. Right? So, and these three are why people get angry. Now, Imam al-Ghazali says the first one is healthy, unless it's taken to an extreme where you go and oppress people. Take their food, take their shelter, do things like that. That's oppression. But the next one, he says, it can be healthy up to a point. But the higher way is to stop seeing yourself and not get angry about these things. And the danger of it is you go to an extreme which is called ba'a, and he'll deal with that. It's a disease, which is where you become so humble that you become humiliated. And the Prophet ﷺ says, "Al-mu'minu la yuzillu nafsah." The mu'min does not humiliate himself. And Allah says that they're a'izza 'ala al-kuffar, ruhama'u baynahum. They have izzah when it comes to the non-Muslims. You're not all humble and meek and Uriah Heep obsequiousness. Right? You have izzah with the kafir. He shouldn't see you as being humble and weak like that. In the face of him. Whereas with the mu'min you should give up those things. Right? And even according to Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, if the kafir says something to you that does not relate to your deen, like not making fun of your deen or something, that you should just ignore it. إِذَا خَاطَبُهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامٌ. When ignorant people speak to them, they just say salam. You shouldn't get angry for things that really there's no benefit in getting angry. Because all they're doing is pushing buttons. And that's why Allah says, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ وَهْجُرْهُمْ هَجَرًا جَمِيلًا. Just be patient about what they're saying, and then leave them in a good way. Right? So just turn away from it. Don't obsess yourself with it, and let it go. Because there's no benefit in it. No benefit. So, and then finally, the fourth one, again, if there's ghayra is something that Sa'ad radiallahu anhu, when the Prophet ﷺ was mentioning about the wife, and Sa'ad said, Wallahi, if I found a man with my wife, لَأَقْتُلَنَّهُ, I'd kill him. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أَنَا أَغْيَرُ مِنْ سَعَدٍ, I have more ghayra than Sa'ad. وَاللَّهُ أَغْيَرُ مِنِّي, and Allah has more ghayra than I do. In other words, that is a good sign. Ghayra is a good thing. And they say ghayra, sometimes it's translated as jealousy. It's an idea of something that you are in protection of, or that, something that's yours, that not letting somebody else do harm to it. A ghayra takes you. So this is why when a Muslim sees the non-Muslim threatening his deen, he gets a ghayra. He becomes ghayur for the deen. He wants to defend the deen. And that's a good thing. That's an anger that's positive. And this is why Allah has made ghayra part of the human nature to protect nasab. Because if men didn't have ghayra for their women, they would lose nasab. People would go and commit adultery with their women, and then you would have a mixture of the nasab. So ghayra is a healthy thing for a man to have. To be jealous of his wife is a good thing, as long as it doesn't go to, obviously, an excess where he oppresses her, right, and becomes suspicious. And it's also a natural thing for the woman to have that ghayra, right? I mean, Allah has made mubah. He permitted the marriage of more than one wife. But the actual experience of a woman towards the man of ghayra is natural. It's part of human nature, and very few women are free from that. So it's not considered a fault, right? Right. Now he says here, له دواءان دواء يرفعه فلا يجي والثاني إن جاء يدفعه. He says that this disease has two cures. One of them will remove the anger when it comes, right? So that you prevent it from coming. And the second will suppress the anger. Now Allah says in the Quran, He praises وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, those who suppress their anger. وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, and those who forgive people. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And that's the famous story of Ja'far al-Tayyar, when one of his servants was pouring and spilt water on him. He became angry, and the servant immediately said, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, and he said, كَظَمْتُهُ, I suppressed it. And he said, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, and he said, عَوْفَوْتُكَ, I forgive you. And he said, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and he said, Allah loves the people of ihsan. He said, you're free for the sake of Allah. And that's the way the mu'min should be. وَقَّافٍ عِنْدَ حُدُودِ اللَّهِ. He should be somebody, when he hears the Quran, in other words, if somebody's backbiting and somebody says, يَا أَخِي لَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا, he should immediately say, astaghfirullah. He shouldn't get angry at the person that he reminded him. And I was once told a story of Shaykh Ibn al-Habib, that a man was with him in a gathering, and he said one of his qualities, he was a Moroccan Shaykh, he said one of his qualities was he never spoke ghiba about anybody. And this is also something that I was told by several people who have been with Murabbit Hajj for over 70 years, and they've said they never heard him once speak badly of a person, ever. And these are people that lived with him every day of his life, see him every day. In 70 years, they said they never heard him once say anything bad about anybody, ever. And, somebody wrote me a letter not that long ago and said, and he's somebody that I think has a lot of taqwa, but he wrote me a letter and he said that he mentioned me in another letter to somebody, and he thinks maybe there was some ghiba in it. So he sent the letter with the thing. He said, if you find any ghiba in it, please tell me so that I can make tawbah. Right? I mean, he was questioning what he'd said. And it was just some disagreements between his understanding and my understanding, which wasn't a problem with me at all. But that type of, even though you don't have to do that, it's called istihlal, or in Sharia, you don't have to go to a person and say, Sayyid Ahmed Zarruq says it's better not to. Unless you know that there are people that aren't going to, because a lot of people will just make them hate you. And if you go and you say, listen, I did ghiba about you, they'll get angry. Whereas other people, it's not a big deal. So, like, The Prophet said, يَعْجِزُ أَحْدُكُمْ أَنْ يَكُونَ أَلَّا يَكُونَ مِثْلُ أَبِي ضَمْضَمْ or أَبِي ضُمْضَمْ. Does one of you, are you unable to be like this man, Abu Damdam? He used to get up every morning and تصدق بعرضه على الناس. He used to give his own good name as sadaqah for people. In other words, he would just say, Ya Allah, if anybody says anything bad about me, I give the hasanat that they gave me back to them. And so he said, just do that. You know, who cares? In the end of the day, if you start thinking about the grave and questioning in the grave, the Yawm al-Qiyamah, if you really think about these things, you're not going to care. I mean, the moment you die, you could care less if so-and-so, said one day that he gets angry too much. Or he said to you one day something that made you angry. It's all going to be completely irrelevant. So, the two diseases, he said, the first one, and then he said here, فَاذْكُرْ لِتَزْدَانَ بِحَلْيَ الرَّافِعِ كَثْرَةَ مَدْحِ الْحِلْمِ وَالتَّوَاضُعِ. He said, remember, in order to be ornamented with this quality of the thing that removes anger, remember the praise of hilm and tawadu'. Because no one gets angry who's a mutakabbir. The mutakabbir can't, the mutawadi', he doesn't get angry. Somebody who's humble, they will not get angry for themselves. They might get angry for Allah, but they won't get angry for themselves. Because Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said, Al-ghadabu tuntijuhu ru'yatun nafs. The only reason people get angry is because they're seeing themselves. And if the self's not there to see, then why get angry? If somebody says, Ya kalb, and it's like the Prophet when they called him, A'udhu billah, mudhammam, right? They called him the opposite of his name. He said, it's amazing how Allah took the tongues of Quraysh that wanted to condemn me, and they condemned some guy named Mudhammam. And I'm Muhammad. Right? So he didn't get angry. He just said, they're not talking about me, they're talking about Mudhammam. I'm Muhammad, right? So that's that idea of just letting it go. If you don't see yourself, there's no self to get angry. And that's tawadu'. And what he's saying is, in order to get this quality, remember how much humility and forbearance is praised. Right? In other words, every culture praises traditional. This culture no longer does. They used to. Right? I mean, humility. There are still people that will do that. But there's definitely one of the things that certain Eastern European elements that immigrated here introduced into the culture was a concept of chutzpah, right? This idea of overweening pride, where you literally, if you've got it, flaunt it, type thing. And this has become something which is actually alien to traditional American culture. Traditionally, Americans actually did appreciate the quality of humility, and generally, it's obviously you're going to get a lot of different people, but what you'll find is humility is praised by all the sages, even outside of the religion of Islam, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man tawada'a lillah rafa'ahu Allah." The one that is humble for Allah's sake, Allah raises him up, and whoever raises himself up, wada'ahu Allah, Allah lowers him down. And qaswa, the camel of the Prophet ﷺ, it used to race, outwin all of the camels of the Arabs, and the Sahaba really liked that because it was the Prophet's camel. But one day it lost a race to a Bedouin, and they all got really upset. And the Prophet laughed, and he said, "Don't you know that nothing ever gets elevated except Allah has to bring it down?" Right? So it's the sunnah of Allah in His creation. And if you understand the sunnah, you can laugh at things like that. You don't get upset. So he's saying, if you really reflect on the praiseworthy quality of hilm and tawadu', and kana ahlam an-nas, the Prophet was the most forbearing of people. He forgave people. He did not get angry. He was very forbearing. And then he also said, في الشرع والشعر, also in poetry. Humility and forbearance is always praised in poetry. Right? So he's saying that you'll find this in the Sharia and in Shi'r. وَالنَّثَرَ الْحُكَمَةِ, and all the sages also in their writings. وَوَصْفَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ طُرًّا بِهِمَا, and that all of the prophets, all of them have been characterized with humility and forbearance. None of them were known as being arrogant or easily angered. They were all known to have hilm wa tawadu'. And then he said, وَدَفْعُهُ يَحْصُلُ بِاسْتِشْعَارِ أَلَّيْسَ فَاعِلٌ سِوَى الْقَهَارِ. You can prevent it or suppress it by recognizing that there's no action except that it's from Allah. So part of when things happen that make you angry, you have to take some breath and just say, La ilaha illallah. This is a bala from Allah. It's a tribulation from Allah to see, أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Who of you are the best in action? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ الشَّدِيد شَدِيد الصُّرَعَ وَإِنَّمَا الشَّدِيد مَنْ غَلَبَ نَفْسَهُ عِنْدَ الْغَضَبِ. The strong man is not the one who can wrestle people down, but the strong man is the one who overcomes his self when he becomes angry. That's the shadid. That's the real strong man. It's not the other thing. And one of the things that Imam al-Ghazali says is the hamaqa of some people, he said, is that they see virility and this macho type of posturing as a good character or quality. They become completely short. And so he said, you'll even see a man who brags about his criminal exploits and how he robbed somebody and fought him and did these things, and he'll actually brag about what he thinks is courage. Right? And it's not. It's all, there's nothing virtuous in it whatsoever. So that's recognizing that only Allah is the one that, actually the hadith says first, if you're standing, to sit. And if you're sitting, to recline. And then if neither of those help, to go do wudu, and then to start praying. So he does it this way. But doing wudu will actually put off the heat, because anger is fire. And anger is from shaitan. It's the quality of shaitan. And one day the Prophet ﷺ was there, and somebody became angry, and his face became red, and his veins started bulging, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Subhanallah, have you noticed how one of you, when he gets angry, his face starts looking like a shaitan? And he said, I have a word that if he said it, that would be removed from him. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And I was once in a conflict type resolution situation, and it was really interesting because it started getting heated, and both parties stood up. They were on couches, and they both stood up at the same time. And I made them sit down, but that's the nature of anger. You start rising, and the way that you overcome that is to sit down. Just to sit down. If you're in a room and you begin to feel anger, leave the room. If somebody's making you angry, just leave the room. Go to another place, relax, sit down, and let your anger subside, and you can go back. And this is a practice. If you do it, it works. And if you don't, you'll either end up duking it out, and if he's bigger than you, he beats you up. And if he's smaller than you, everybody sees you as a heel because you're picking on somebody smaller than you. So, just the best thing to do is just avoid it. There's no benefit in it. There's none. It's just empty, meaningless tripe, and it's just best to get out of it. So that's the sunnah, to do that. Right? Cold water, to be quiet, to sit down, right? And then ta'awwud, to say a'udhu billahi minash shaitan. Those all came in the sunnah. Now, Imam al-Ghazali said that one man who had a fierce temper actually hired a man to insult him and paid him money to say like, ya kalb, ya himar. And he would listen until he could control himself. that's probably extreme. But the point is, people took these things very seriously. Because you don't want to have anger. It's a horrible quality. Now, there is a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-hiddatu ta'tari khiyara ummati." Anger will even afflict the best of my ummah. And nobody displays that better than Sayyidina Umar, radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Umar became very angry. But if you look at Sayyidina Umar, his development as a human being in his Islam, radiallahu anhu, by the end of it, Umar was not a person that his anger ever got the best of him. In fact, it was the opposite. He would tend to be actually very forgiving. And you can see this in his later period. And even when he was stabbed to death, he asked, the first thing he asked, was it a Muslim? And the man said no, and he praised Allah that a Muslim didn't kill him. He just didn't want that a Muslim would have done that to him. He said, Alhamdulillah. And that was his nature, even though he was very ferocious and a lion of Allah, he didn't. And once the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with women from the Quraysh in Medina, and Omar came in, and they immediately all fled into the other room. This was before the hijab came down. And they were sitting, and they all fled into the room and hid behind this curtain. And Omar comes in, he sees this, and the Prophet's laughing, and he said, "Ma adhakaka ya Rasulullah, why are you laughing?" He said, "I'm laughing at these Qurayshi women. When they see you, they flee." And then he went over and he called these women back, and they said, Omar said, "A'udhu billah, how is it that you flee from me and you're not shy before the Messenger of Allah? He's more worthy to be shy before." And they said, "But you're aghladu wa afaddu. You're meaner and harsher than the Messenger of Allah. He doesn't get angry." And the Prophet ﷺ, he laughed and he said, "Ya Sayyidina Umar, لو سرقت فجا لسرق الشيطان فجا آخر." If you went down a path, Shaitan would go down another path. That he was. That idea of learning to control the anger, Umar radiallahu anhu is really an example of somebody who mastered that quality. He really mastered it. And but again, he's adl, and adl is rooted in ghadab, but it's a healthy ghadab. He wants justice because there's indignation. He becomes angry when he's wrong. He wants to right that wrong. And even went to kill the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam before he became Muslim. That did in a desire to right a wrong. He felt it was wrong. So it was always rooted in his belief. He had a very strong sense of justice. And the Khattab family were traditionally in the Jahiliyyah Arab culture. So that is and obviously the Bahr will go on. But I'm going to start. Is there questions? Was there a question over here earlier? They do have what? I mean, personally, for children that are under 7, you have to really be careful about becoming angry with them. If they're over 7, then you need to display discipline. I mean, they have to be disciplined. In fact, interestingly enough, I didn't mention this, but in these 3 souls, the question was about, getting angry if you're a teacher and you need to establish discipline. And in the souls, the 3 souls, the stages are the first 7 years are the appetitive soul. So that's why you see children are constantly eating, wanting, it's all shahawat and fulfilling their appetitive soul. And then the second 7 years is the ghadab. And then the third is the rational or the ilm. Right? So this is the first. So if they're in the second, this is why the hadith says لَعِبُوهُمْ لِسَبْعٍ. And lu'b is fulfilling shahwa. right? Because the Prophet ﷺ said that there's no lu'b in Islam except one of them is with the spouse, right? That's a good lu'b, to play with your wife. And the Prophet ﷺ played with his wife. It was muda'aba and this type thing. So the hadith of Sayyidina Ali was لَعِبُوهُمْ لِسَبْعٍ. Play with them for 7 years. During this period of the appetitive soul, just allow them to indulge themselves. It's part of what they're meant to do. They're discovering the world. And it's all sensual because they've been in a spiritual realm and now they've moved into the realm of sensory, and so they have to come into their bodies and they have to experience it. And that's why oftentimes children, things will happen to them that are quite traumatic. Like they get burnt. In those first 7 years, they fall from high places. These are all learning to come into their body and discovering that they have a body. It's a hikmah of Allah that those things happen to children, because they're literally to teach them the limitations of the body, that the body has limits, unlike the ruh, which is a more limitless type of entity. The body is limited, and the sharia is a protection for the body. Touch fire. You stay away from high places. You don't endanger yourself. And so, you allow them to discover the world at those first 7 years. It really is discovering the world. And that's why a ghulam, the root of ghulam is to lust. Ghaluma means to lust. So it's a lusty experience. They're very sensuous, right? They like touch a lot. Children like to be touched a lot. And it's part of their development, of discovering their bodies. And then this period, he said, أَدِّبُوهُمْ لِسَبْعٍ. Now you have to discipline them, because now their ghadab needs to be disciplined. They're moving into another stage, right? They need now to have discipline. And the discipline is when you see them getting angry, you don't allow them to do that, right? Children, you don't let children get angry at the parents. That's a bad sign. You have to teach them to control their anger. And if you're not controlling your anger, it's a disaster. فَاقِدُ شَيْءٍ لَا يُعْطِيهِ. If you don't have something, you can't give it to somebody else. So if they see you getting angry all the time, they're just going to imitate the behavior. And then you'll wonder, where'd they get that temper? Right? And it's from you, because you're their model. So the ta'deeb comes in those next 7 years. And then he said, then خَلِلُوهُمْ لِسَبْعٍ. Befriend them for 7 years, because this last stage is the stage of ilm. Now they're moving into the stage where they need, they need your guidance, they need your mashawara, they need your counsel, because you're going to help direct them, to learning, to what they're going to do with their education, those type things. That's a traditional model anyway. Any other? Mm-hmm.
Differentiate more between hilm and qabl al-ghayb.
It's interesting. The word for hilm. What's it mean in Arabic? I know, but what's the root word though? What are ahlam? When they said sabbahu ahlamana, the intellect. So really, forbearance is a sign of intellect. Why? Because you have your quwwa al-ghadabiyya under control. It's guided by your rational soul. So your aql is working. Because the aql it's an iqal, ya'qiluhu. The aql is what puts the irascible and the concupiscent soul in check. It's an iqal for it, right? Aql means to prevent. And that's what the rational mind is supposed to do. It's supposed to keep the ghadab and the shahwa in check. And if it doesn't, you're not aql, you're not halim, you're himar or whatever. I mean, that's what they say. If somebody gets really angry, they say, ya himar. You're like a donkey or something like that. Why? Because he's acting like a beast, he's not acting like a human being. And usually he's a himar too, because he's angry too.
But the difference between hilm and tahallum, right?
A tahallum, very good point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I forgot to mention that. I'm really glad you brought that up. there is a hadith, and this is really important, because some of us are going to say, my God, I can't do any of this, it's all too hard, and I'm a mess, and I get angry, and I do this and that, and I eat too much chocolate, or whatever. Now, the hadith says, and I'm glad that Abu Dhar brought this up, the hadith says, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. Knowledge is through acquisition. You acquire knowledge. You're not born alim. You become an alim. How did you do it? Through effort, mujahada. Right? The alim is the one he struggles to learn. He gets up in the night, he studies, he reads, he goes to the dars, he listens, he takes notes, he studies, he reviews, all that. That's mujahada. So you weren't born with that knowledge, it's something that you acquire. Hilm is the same thing. The hadith says, وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. Now what happens when you become an alim? Somebody who's an alim, if you see an alim, what does it appear to you? You don't see that he was a student. It seems like they always had that. Right? That's what it seems. You don't see when they were doing all their studying and all their work and all that. The same with the halim. You don't see when he was struggling with it. You think it's like he was born that way. It's something you acquire. And that's what that's what Umar radiallahu anhu, he acquired it. Tahallum. He didn't. And then tahallum is from tafa'ul, which is takalluf. You have to work for it. It's hard. Now, really important point. Imam al-Ghazali uses the metaphor of a calligrapher. He says, what do you do when you have a bad handwriting? And this is a metaphor. What do you do when you're angry? He said, you go to somebody who has an excellent hand. And you watch him. And then you ask him to draw you the letters. And then you go home and you keep doing the letters over and over again. And initially they're going to be lousy. But suddenly, about a month or 2 months later, you start noticing there's an improvement, but it's still not mastery. It's far from it. But it looks much better. And somebody who's not even started, he'll say, you have great handwriting. But if the master looks at it, he said, this is terrible. Right? Because sayyat al-abrar, right? Hasanat al-abrar, sayyat al-muqarrabin, you're moving up in ranks. Now, what happens when you become a master? You see them drawing. Like I watched Muhammad Zakaria. I took a lesson in calligraphy from him, the first lesson I had, and I watched him do it, and I was thinking, I can do that. Wallahi, I thought that. I said, that looks so easy. Right? Because he's a master. He is a master. Like he's American master of calligraphy. He wins awards in Turkey and things. But I didn't see all those nights and years that he was doing it. Now, he just makes it look like he was born writing perfect calligraphy. And then when I got the pen and started doing it, and it's like jumping up and down. Really, it was hard. It flowed across the paper. That's because of mastery. And so the same thing happened now. The really interesting thing about this. So what do you do when you want good character? You do three things. One, you learn what it is. You have to learn what bad character is and what good character is. And that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing. We're doing the first stage. You have to learn what good character is, and you have to learn what bad character is. The second stage is mujahada. وَالَّذِينَ جَهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبَلَنَا. Those who struggle, for our sake, we will guide them to our path. But then you have to, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ. You have to have صحبة. الْمَرْءُ عَلَى دِينِ خَلِيلِهِ. You have to find people with good character, and you have to spend time with them. And there's another benefit in being with people who get angry easily, right? Is to recognize how unpleasant it is. And this is why Imam Shafi'i, once somebody asked him, how did you get such excellent character? He said, I listened to what my detractors said about me, and then I looked into my soul to see if it was true, and when it was, I struggled with myself until I removed it. Sayyidina Isa was asked by a man once, how did you get such excellent character? And the prophets are born with it, but this is what the tradition says. He said, I looked at the bad character of people and I avoided it. Right? So part of it is doing a mujahada. But the third stage is to be with the person who has good character. And see, Ahmed Zarruq says, وَهُوَ مَعْدُوم good luck, right? It's difficult to find. But we shouldn't ever despair, and at least we should be trying I'll tell you, this stuff, it really works. I'm serious. I mean, I'm nowhere where I'd like to be, but really it helped me a lot to learn a lot of these things and to just, struggle with myself as much as I can. And hopefully, you get better and you improve and you do change, right? Seriously. I mean, ghadab was a real serious trouble for me for a long, long time, and it's much less so now. And part of that is aging, thank goodness. Right? Imam Sayyidina Ali said that youth is a darbun min al-junun. It's a type of madness. وَدَوَاءُهُ الشَّيْخُوخَةِ. And the cure is to get old. So, Yeah, anger with the parents. That's then you should be angry at the act, not at the actor. In other words, it should upset you what's being done, the action of the person. But if it's your father or your mother, you have to be really careful. If you're able to do amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar, then you should. Dhan al-ifada is the wujub is based on dhan al-ifada and not leading to a worse fitna. But the parents, you have to be really careful about it. The Prophet ﷺ, a man came to the Prophet and he said that my father takes my money and it really angers me. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Anta wa maluka li abik." You and your wealth belong to your father. In other words, he was the means by which you were given existence. So the parents really have a high maqam in Islam. It's just, that's a given. And the best thing to do with the parents is recognize that they're human beings. They have their limitations. I had a teacher once who told me, he wasn't a Muslim, he was a very wise person, he was a good teacher. And he said to me once that he thanked his father because he taught him how not to be a father. And he said he really did, his father was so harsh on him that he did the opposite with his children. And he said in the end he realized that it was a gift that his father gave him. And he was genuine in that. He wasn't saying, he was saying, I realized, obviously, and that's looking at the good side of something. Obviously it'd be better if you had a father who was a good example and showed you how to be a father, not how to not be a father. But the idea is taking the worst situation and making the best of it. And that's a gift. And that's hikmah. وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ حِكْمَةً فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. I mean, that is hikmah. And that's the beauty of Islam, is that in any situation, it can be beneficial for the mu'min. Assalamu alaikum.
Quickly, and then I want to go to the sheet that I've given you, is the section on the treatment of the diseases with remembrance of Allah. There's no better treatment for the diseases of the heart than with dhikr. Somebody said, إذا مرضنا تداوينا بذكركم ونترك الذكر أحيانا فننتكس. Which means if we get ill, meaning have diseases of our heart, then we treat ourselves with your remembrance. And sometimes we abandon your remembrance and we have a relapse. So what he means there is that the diseases of the self are treated by dhikr of Allah. And when you leave dhikr of Allah, you have relapses of those diseases. So if you get angry, and at the point you get angry, you remember Allah. And this is what Sayyidina Umar, one of his people from his shura, had a cousin who was just kind of an ignorant type person, but he said, listen, get me in with Umar. Because in those days Umar had a hajib, and he was the ruler of large portion of land, and the Muslims. So this man wanted to get in, and he brought him in because he was one of Sayyidina Umar's shura, and the man was his cousin, so he got him in with him. And when he stopped, he said to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, Ya Umar, أعطيني مما أعطاك الله فوالله ما أعطيت جزرا ولا حكمت بعدل أو عدلا. He said, give me something from what Allah gave you, meaning like money. And he said, because you're somebody that hasn't given out much and you don't judge with justice. Now Umar got really angry, and hamma bihi, he was actually going to do something about it. And then his cousin immediately said to Umar, يا أمير المؤمنين ألم تسمع بقول الله تعالى وأعرض عن الجاهلين. Just turn away from ignorant people. And when he did that, Umar completely stopped, and the Rawi says وكان وقافا عند كتاب الله. He was doing only what the Book of Allah told him. So the point is, his anger, and he was justified in his anger, because the man was just, he said a lie, and he also insulted the political authority. Right? I mean, there's ways to speak to people, and you shouldn't insult them, because it's a disrespect for the authority of Islam, the Khalifa. But the point is when he immediately, the man reminded him of the Quran, he stopped. And so that's the meaning here. إذا مرضنا, like with غضب, تداوينا بذكركم. We treat ourselves with your remembrance. وَنَتْرُكَ ذِكْرَ أَحْيَانًا فَنَنْتَكِسُ. But sometimes we leave the dhikr and then we have relapse. And so what he's saying here is that all these diseases can be treated with dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he begins with dhikr kathir. So do a lot of dhikr. Come from the ayat in Quran. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ ذِكْرًا كَثِيرًا. Do much remembrance of Allah. Right? And many ayahs in the Quran encouraging us to do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, the verse in the Quran which says, وَلَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, you have in the message of Allah the best example. لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. So if you look, the only people that are going to benefit from the messenger of Allah's example are people who do a lot of dhikr of Allah. Because those are the people that their character will be changed. And the word in Arabic for tazkiyah, zakah, means to grow. And zakah, like zakat, means to grow. Yuzaki means yunammi, to make something grow. So tazkiyatun nafs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if it wasn't for His bounty, none of you would have grown. مَا زَكَ مِنْكُمْ أَحَدٍ مِنْ أَحَدٍ. So the tazkiyah of the self is a result of work. And the spiritual work that you do is dependent on the dhikr of Allah that you do. Praying the prayers on time is the most important thing. That's if you're not doing that, forget everything else. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu wrote to his ummal, and it's in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, in Babu Khutas, the times of the prayer. He wrote, and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was one of his ummal, and he said, radiallahu anhu, he said, إِنِّي لَأَرَى مِنْ أَهَمِّ أُمُورِكُمْ الصَّلَاةِ. I consider prayer to be the most important thing that you do in your life. فَمَنْ حَفِظَهَا وَحَافِظَ عَلَيْهَا فَقَدْ حَفِظَ دِينَهُ. So whoever guards his prayer and is vigilant about it, about its time, he has guarded his deen. وَمَنْ ضَيْعَهَا فَهُوَ لِمَا سِوَاهَا أَضِيعَ. And whoever is negligent about his prayer, everything else he's going to be more negligent about. So if you're not getting the prayer right, then you've got your priorities wrong about everything. So prayer in its time, with its ahkam, you have to know what's fard, what's mandub, what's sunnah mu'akkada, so that you can pray properly. You have to know how to do istidrak of your prayer. So that's related to fard ayn. So if there's people now who do a lot of dhikr with a subha, and then they don't do their prayers. There's people that will stay up all night for like a mawlid and be doing dhikr, and then they sleep through fajr. All that they did in the night is a complete waste of time. Waste of time, completely, nothing. Because if that caused them to miss their fajr prayer, there was no good in it. None. The fard is the most important thing in your life. So the foremost thing that you do is your prayer. And your prayer has to be based on wudu, and doing wudu properly, and with its conditions also. And tahara. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَيْرُ لِلْعَقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. Woe to the aqab from the fire, people that don't do the wudu and guard their wudu. And then he also said people will be punished for urine that they weren't concerned about, that spilt on them. So guarding against najasa. These are all things and ways of remembering Allah. And that's why they say, أَفْضَلُ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ ذِكْرُهُ عِنْدَ حَدِّهِ. The best remembrance of Allah is to remember Allah when there's a had of Allah. So somebody who's doing dhikr all the time, and there's a riwayah, it's apocryphal, it's not, I don't know the transmission, but it said that Dawood alayhi salam saw a group of people remembering Allah, and he was impressed with them, and then it was revealed to him that those people are of no worth in the sight of Allah. Because if one woman offered herself to any of them, they would have gone with her. So the point is that outwardly a person, if they look good, if they look strong, if they look all these things, and they're not worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or if the taqwa is not there when the hadd of Allah is coming, then it's of no benefit. And so he says, وَالذِّكْرَ كَثَّرْ وَالْقُرْآنُ خَيْرُهُ. The best dhikr is Qur'an. And the best dhikr of Qur'an is Qur'an with tadabbur. Recitation of Qur'an with tadabbur, which is reading Qur'an, understanding its meaning. And the more you read Qur'an with understanding, the stronger the iman becomes. That's why Qira'at al-Qur'an with tadabbur is so important, because it will actually increase your iman. And then he says, إِلَّا بِمَا شُرِعَ فِيهِ غَيْرُهُ. Now this is important. What he means by that is, مَا شُرِعَ بِهِ غَيْرُهُ is when the only time the Qur'an is not the preferred dhikr is when other things are to be done at that time. So for instance, after Fajr, the best dhikr is to do the adhkar of the sabah. It's actually better to do the adhkar of sabah at that time than it is to read the Qur'an. After Maghrib or after Asr, the best dhikr is to do the adhkar of the Masa. And those are actually over the Qur'an at that time. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ did those at that time, and he encouraged us to do those. No, that's what we're going to go into. It's the thing that you have in front of you. And then he says, Then he says, وَدَّ بِالْإِسْتِغْفَارِ وَالصَّلَاةِ عَلَى جَرِيدِنَا إِلَى الْخَيْرَاتِ. Begin with istighfar. The reason that you begin your dhikr with istighfar is because dhikr is for tasfiyah. And tasfiyah is to be purified of what has accrued from previous wrong actions. And so by beginning with istighfar, you're asking Allah to remove your wrong actions, and then he said the prayer on the Prophet. And this is traditionally the most common word that was given was istighfar, salah ala nabi, and then tahdeer la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, la ilaha illallah 100 times. So istighfar 100 times, prayer on the Prophet 100 times, la ilaha illallah 100 times, and then the ikhlas and the ma'awidatayn 3 times each. And that was very common for people to do as a practice. And you should do istighfar at least 100 times a day, preferably 100 in the morning, 100 in the evening. And then do it throughout the day. And then he said, وَأْدَى بِآدَابِ الصَّلَاةِ وَاحْتَمِي مِنْ لَحْنِهِ فَهُوَ مِنَ الْمُحَرَّمِ Have the adab of the prayer and guard yourself from any lahm. Adab of the prayer on the Prophet ﷺ is the adab of the prayer of salah. So you should have the same adab that you do when you do dhikr, you should do it for like the prayer. If you're not in wudu, you should do wudu. You should be in a tahir place. Now this doesn't mean like when you're traveling in your car, it's encouraged to do if you want to recite Quran or do dhikr. If you don't have wudu, then that's alright. You can do it without from your memory, without the wudu. It's preferable to be in the wudu, but if you're in a situation to remember Allah and you don't have wudu, then you can do that. And it's better to stay in wudu all the time, if you're able to. لَا يُحَافِظُ عَلَى الْوُضُوءِ إِلَّا مُؤْمِنٌ. No one will protect his wudu except for a mu'min.
Is listening to the recitation of the Quran considered better or worse than other?
No, that's good. To listen is better to recite it. Because when you listen to it, the only thing you get is your ear. When you recite it, and that's why the ulama say to recite from the mushaf is more reward than reciting it from memory. Because the eye gets reward, the hand holding it, there's more musharaka in it. Right? So it's actually better to read from the mushaf. But if you memorize from the Quran, a lot of shaykh that I saw, like in Mauritania in particular, because so many people memorize the Quran, they rarely even use a mushaf. People that, in fact one shaykh I knew, he told me he hadn't touched a mushaf in probably about 30 years. Yeah. But also that's a Bedouin environment and books get ruined very easily, and traditionally that's why they memorized everything, because the books got lost. Whereas you live in the cities, the books are always there, part of it. And that's one of the things that in one of Plato's dialogues, when the man who invented writing brings it to the king tells him, this is a terrible thing that you've done. He said, why? He said, people will lose memory and they'll rely on the pen. So he saw the bad thing. Obviously there's great benefit in Allah taught with the pen, but also there's, having easy availability. Like one of the things about in modern Islam, traditionally because the Quran was not published, and the ulama of the Ottoman Empire gave a fatwa of the prohibition of printing the Quran originally. They considered it haram because they considered pounding the letters, and pounding was a sacrilege to the Quran, and that it should be written with the pen and should be done by a scribe and not by a machine. And that was a standing fatwa for 400 years. Yeah, they did not print the Quran. The Quran was actually printed in Europe before it was printed in the Muslim lands. But the point is that people don't realize that the Quran now, because there's so many, and people don't treat the Quran anywhere near the respect that they used to treat it with. People put the Quran on the floor. You go into a mosque, I always judge a mosque by the Qurans in the bookshelves. Always. That's all you have to do. You look at and Shaykh Abdullah al-Qadi, one of the things that most impressed me about his masjid in Al-Ahsa, where his Shaykh teaches, the Qurans are all in perfect order. Every time, and they read from them. You see everybody reads them at Jumu'ah, everybody's reading. At the end of the Jumu'ah, they're all back in perfect order. And that's from Shaykh being there teaching them. You go to other places, every time I go, there's mosques in there, every time I go there, I look at the thing, it's always really bad. And that's all, some are upside down, some are that's all bad adab. And adab that's what our deen is all about, learning adab with Allah and with creation. And then it says, beware of lahm, which is bad pronunciation, because it's muharram, unless you can't do otherwise. So for instance,